Hello, Stellar people, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey, and we will continue with week 5 of the 100-Day March, which is a challenge to make a 24-page comic in 100 days, or thereabouts. So now we are at the good part, the, the part I most enjoy, and that is just straight drawing. We are at the pencil phase, and we will be doing this phase for the whole month of April. But first, let's look at the schedule. So here we are in April, week 5, and we're going to go over the pencils. And April has 5 weeks. We are in that second week of April, where pencils is our main focus. Next week will be layouts and text, as well as pencils. So now that we got that straight, let's talk about characters. Characters I do in tandem with the comic usually. When I'm starting the story, making the story, I think about what are the characters in it. I try to think about the main characters first. And then is there any ancillary characters that also interact with the main characters? And then there can be background cast, like people walking in a scene that aren't really being talked to, but make the world feel alive. And you can do this all at the same time. So like when I'm writing the story or developing a story, I do the characters just a light, rough sketch of what they look like. Main cast first, because they're the most important. But this also goes through phases. Everything of my art goes through phases. So this was the first phase of Beautiful Beast Chapter 3. Beautiful Beast Kiss is on the far left. And she jumps through dimensions, right? She's on a quest to get power crystals or power gems to make herself stronger and jump farther into dimensions. And she also changes her look in every dimension that she's in. So she is our main character. So she is the one I have to develop the most because she is seen in almost every single panel. So then we have the cast that she meets, talks to, and goes through this first part with. So the first 12 pages have these characters. And so we have Bunny, the moon rabbit, who is one of the first characters she meets. Then Birdie also makes an appearance. And Demon Cat is the third character that she meets, or that she wants to meet. So these are like our main leads: Beautiful Beast Kiss, Demon Cat. So I try to think about all of these characters at the same time. I knew what the story was going to be, and that was the moon and the Moon Palace. And I knew since Demon Cat is a demon tiger child, and she's a sun tiger child, that I wanted something within this range. So Bunny, there's a concept of in Asia that their rabbits live on the moon, and I like that idea. So that was the impetus for this character being a rabbit. And then Birdie was someone from another story I did of the Moon Princess, and she makes an appearance after Bunny. But also what I like to mention is I try to make every character distinct in, say, behavior. And so I like to have that demonstrated through the art. So she is bold and adventurous, right? And I try to imply that through her physical posture. She is mischievous, and so I have a slight grin, and she's slightly covering her mouth like she's about to laugh. She's more reserved, and he's like a posh little schoolboy. And he's kind of a mage-like character, cool, calm, collected. And I try to have an idea of what the character is like just through their posture. So I try to keep that in mind as I'm developing. But this is like one of the earlier versions of the characters. But I also try to think about the villain. So the second part, the second half, is more battle-oriented with Beautiful Beast Kiss, and the object or creature to be overcome, the antagonist, as you will. So she has to go battle this creature to get what she wants. So I thought about the character of the villain, and I try to think about a villain as being different than your hero. Right? So this is a small winged tiger child, that this would be a big, large, strong, muscular character, the beast, as we'll call it, in the story. So I try to think about how the characters play off of other characters in terms of visuals, theming, and what they mean in the story. So this is the villain, and I called it the Wilder Go. Play off of Wendigo, which is a creature, a cannibal monster said to be live in Canada, almost like a Sasquatch. So after this initial sketch, I go into my lead is the most important, so I develop them first. So in this new dimension, I thought of Beautiful Beast Kiss, and she's on the moon, and I thought of her hair kind of being more a swimmy, floaty, right? There's less gravity on the moon, so her clothes and hair kind of move awkwardly and kind of float. While in the second part, she has gravity and her hair is slightly more down. So this is like the second pass, and also a slight character change, costume change. And that leads to the next phase, where I thought about the posture. I brought this posture back and also developed the one on the moon, floaty hair, floaty clothes, and the second part where she's more battle oriented. And it's just a level of refinement. And then after that, I think about when I have this character, but if it was Kiss, mostly developed the way I want it, then I go into having the other characters kind of in line with hers. Right? So Bunny, Birdie, and DC have a similar look to Beautiful Beast Kiss. And then up top, I try to change things. If I don't like it, I'm like, maybe I can try it slightly this way, or, and hairstyles and all of this. And after this phase, so we have the main character, and then we develop the secondary characters based off of our main. And then we move into tighter pencils. And this isn't all at one time. I usually do this at the same time I'm doing the comic. So I'm developing the comic and I'm developing the characters in tandem at the same time. So we have DC and his little mage Harry Potter schoolboy look. A more developed Beautiful Beast Kiss, and then the battle part. And it's just tightening up the pencils, making clearer decisions on what I actually want, what stays, what goes. And then finally, we go into, I call the inking part, the final. This is locked in as what the characters look like officially, so that I know when I'm going to ink them that they look like this. So this is like the master version. Now, as you draw the comic, or as you draw characters for a lot of time, over many days, there will be shifts in the look. And at the end, you'll be a better drawer. You'll be more skilled at drawing the character if you do it over and over and over again, panel after panel. And so you want to go back and change the designs somewhat slightly, and you can do that within reason, but you still gotta try to keep the schedule, keep things moving. But this is the official characters, and you don't have to have this all at once. It's a stepping stage, right? First is thumbnails, next is we're at the pencil stage, next month is the inking stage, and after that is the putting all together stage. So we'll look at these more at the inking stage. So if you if you're making your own comic, you could ink your characters at the same time that you're inking your pages. But also, in the pencil phase, if you're making sketches on the characters, moving them around, trying different facial features, facial expressions, you're trying different things to be in character, you're developing the character, you can do that in the pencil phase. So not everything has to be done at the exact same time. And you see, do these things gradually over the course of the project. I don't have this down to a science, but this is more or less how I do it. So let's move on to the comic. Now for the comic pages, this is page 1. And during the course of April, I think every week we're going to do a different page, and I'll show you how I step up my pencils. Today will be the first page, and then next week will be the second page. A week after that, we'll jump to page 14, which is the start of the second half of the story, and then page 15. And we'll go over step by step, like every week, how we go from a simple to more complex. So this week is page 1. So just a quick rundown of my layers for Clip Studio Paint when I'm making my comics. Starting at the base layer, I just 11 by 17. And then on top of that, I import an image of a comic book sheet page. And it has all the blue line markings. I like to have an idea of where my safety zones are, where the trim lines, the bleeds, and all of that. I like to know all of that. So I bring that in. And then on top of that, we have the very rough thumbnail version of the comic. The comic page with the written in text. This is the earliest form. And then I make 2 layers, which is the background layer and the pencil layer. Pretty self-explanatory. Backgrounds for the background when I draw those in, and the pencils where I do the main character images. And then I have my text layer. So I take this written text and turn it into typed text. And nothing's really, I haven't arranged it exactly how I want it, but I just like to know where these things will approximately be and how big. And then I have on top the character designs at the top, because if I forget about what the characters look like, I can go off into a whole new direction. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't on model. This isn't what the character quite looks like. So I like to remind myself of what the characters look like. So I put that at the top. And so for pencils, this would, take that text. So this was the thumbnail version. This is what I have so far. And now this is what I usually work on. So let's get started. And mostly I work all over. I don't stay in one place too long. The very first starting point is I try to make a basis for the body, a dummy, a rough in of the physical, the posture, the anatomy. I try to keep all of that as the first thing. And then I develop on top of that her look, just to get it down. So let's go. And double tap P to get to the pencil, which is a design pencil for this early rounds. And what I can do, right, is I can flatten the pencils and the rough thumbnail version of the comic, and then chop that up and move the pieces around to keep things within the borders and adjust things as I need it. But usually I like to focus on just getting the character where I want them first. She's got wings, and I try not to think too hard about it. She has her athletic wear, and I clean it up as I go. So shoulders, I adjust things to make them more in line. So she's got to dig in. just a little bit. Like she's coming in for a landing. And usually the facial expression I leave for last. I try to block in the bigger items, such as the face and head positions, body positions, and whatnot. But I move all over. Again, I'm going from a simple to complex, layers and layers over a course of time. Also, I also forget a lot of times that she's not super cheapified, but she looks younger. So she doesn't have super muscle definition, but she is the fighting adventure type. And she has a little body check. And I usually leave the harder parts for last. Well, depends. Sometimes what I think is going to be hard isn't hard, and things that I think will be simple are not simple. But it all depends. And next week we'll talk more about layout. Because, right, there's all this space here, and I don't need all this space here. So I need to put things. She needs to move over. This could be slightly over, but I also want areas for the text bubbles to be. So yeah, I'm not focusing on any one part. Mostly I'm just trying to get it out, get it down. Worry about the details later. Focus. And one of the hardest things to do is to keep characters on model, especially in the beginning. In the beginning, I find it really, really difficult to keep my characters the way I designed them. And so usually I have to look more at the design sheet, but it gets easier the more you draw the characters. And that's normal. As you draw a character more and more times, you find shortcuts, and it just becomes much more natural. And a lot of things, this is just an aside. The story doesn't really make sense, or I'm not taking it seriously. This isn't a serious comic. Erase out some things. I'm not trying to be super deep on this one. This is just more or less for fun. More or less for funsies. Because I was thinking, like, how does she breathe on the moon? And it's like, that's not, right? I'm not worried about that. It's like, she just does. Let's call it a dimensional power. Anything I don't know, I just chalk up to, dimensional powers. So sometimes you have to think about, is this serious? You know, if it's just fun, not incredibly deep, you can get away with more things than, right, suspension of disbelief, and where your story sits in that realm. And I gotta move this up. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to think about when you're thinking about paneling, and where do characters sit? How do they sit in the page? How much of the character do you show? Do you try different angles, right? And an angle or a camera angle, which is what you're trying to simulate. A particular way of view or viewpoint can have a very strong effect on how it looks. Like if you made it a dark, scary story, you can imagine you're going to have scary imagery and thinking of darker blacks, like larger spot blacks when you're going to ink, and camera angles that are either isolating. I try to break my characters down into simple shapes, especially at this phase, because it helps. So for example, the rib cage is a small egg shape. The hips is a small box, but it's bigger than her egg shape. So there's like a flour sack, which is what we were taught in animation and images, combining these two images. Right, so she's looking left, looking right, like, where am I? What dimension have I jumped to now? So she's like, and she notices that the gravity is not there. It's like, whoa, everything's kind of floaty. And again, I'm using simple shapes to just block in her form. So that cylinders for arms, circles for deltoids, the egg shape for her rib cage, a box for the hips. Let's give a little side plane here. We're just fleshing it out. Nothing is nailed down at this point. And I think this is one of the most fun parts. Because it's just, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. The freedom. And yeah, I think I'll probably take this one out and keep this one. So she's turning to see exactly where she is. I like this expression. And sometimes you can draw on just based on how you feel. So if you get a good drawing, you're like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to keep that one. I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it, but if I see a drawing I like, I try to just lean into it. So she's going to do it. Turn. And I try to keep the stronger silhouettes. And so that means moving limbs out of the way of the main body. So it's an easier read on what she's doing. Cage, side plane. And so she's turning. And again, they don't have to be great drawings. You're just trying to get an impression. I'll probably take this out. And then go to the next page as the reveal. So this page, and then it flows into this page where she's like, and this will be the earth seen at a distance. And so she's like, oh, whoa. And then while we set up there's another character that we can see here, right? But we focus on our main character. And then only here is she like, what in the world? Who the heck is that? And so we'll develop this one next week. So now let's pick up the pace and go over like the second part of the page one. So once I have some fairly good idea of my roughs, then I make corrections. I start erasing some of the stuff that I don't need, some of the underdrawings, and I get into adjustment phase where I start to think about, okay, so if this panel is going to be here and I don't want this character to be in the way, I adjust them, move them around, enlarging, shrinking, and thinking more about where the exact panels are going to be. I think this middle one is going to be the main focus of this page. And so I can have the character Beautiful Beast Kiss bursting out of it, or bursting out of the frame. So that's an idea. And this one, panel, I'm not sure if I want, but I'll shrink it down and move it to the side. I know I want this one, but there's adjustments and shifts that need to be made as I prepare it for what it's going to look like in the exact comic book format. And so the basics of a comic book format is that there are all these panels that divide up the action. All right, panels give the impression that time is advancing from one action to another action, from what is being said in one panel to what is being said in the next. And so there's a progression of time. And so I do these just very basic, bare bones ideas of where I want the panels to be. And after that, then I bring up my reference for my characters, and now I can tighten up now that I have an idea of the placement and things that will be in the panel. Now I start to get into the character, the costuming, and tighten that up so that if they're off model, I try to nudge them near to where I actually want them to be. A lot of corrections, a lot of erasing. Now that I have the construction underneath or some idea of where I'm going, I can now edit myself to make things tighter and much better. And this is still not the tight pencils that I want, or I can think about inking as the next step. But I try to get it closer to what I want. So this is a lot of adjustments. I would say this phase is very much the fix-it phase, or the solidifying phase, where I know now what I think I want, and now I can tighten it up. Still, it's pretty rough, pretty loose, but we're nudging it along its path. A lot of moving and shifting. I don't focus on the facial expressions because they can always change if I have a better idea or something. But I like to try to make it as clear to myself what is actually going on in the panel. And hair can be complicated, so I usually leave that, kick that can down the road until next time. Also, one thing I must say is that you'll get better over the course of making it. Your character will get more defined and refined as you keep drawing the character more and more and more. And so I try to use that as I go through the whole thing. So from the very first page is going to be usually rougher than once you get to page 24. And then if you go back to page 1 and try to clean it up, you'll be better just in general because you had some experience drawing the character. And so I keep trying to replicate that process, 1 to 24. And then you go back to the 124. You go back 120, And that repetition, that cycle, the character in general gets better. And you also get faster and more knowledgeable about what the character is about. So that's always interesting in the process of making things. This panel is, I was doing two actions in the same, but I think I might split them up just to see what that looks like. I can always, draw them separately and then have one more transparent than the other one, just to imply that there's, quick action in succession. So that might work, or I just might split them up into two panels. I'm not sure, but I'll think about it as I continue on. But fleshing out what action or activity is happening in the panel, and if I wanted, if one looks better than the other, I can make that the dominant one and the second one the secondary. But yeah, not quite sure, but we'll see. And I also thought about, she's on the moon, so I have to give some kind of, before she realizes that she's someone with less gravity, that to have that kind of reflected in her activity, like she's not quite standing as solidly as one would in gravity. And then she realizes this, and then and naturally in the course you'll gravitate to some drawings more than others. It's fairly natural. It sometimes you have just an image that on the first take you're like, okay, I like that image and I want to keep it and plus it. Plussing as in, work on it more, refine it more. But that one's going to be a lock. The text might change and other things might be rearranged around it, but sometimes there's just that one image that you're like, yeah, I like that one, I'll keep that. So this might be a panel that I end with, but I'm still not sure. So, I'll flesh it out, see how I feel about this one and the very last panel on the page. If this might be the last panel. But sometimes you have time. You don't have to make solid decisions at this point. We're just pretty much still in the play, still in the experimentation. Nothing is locked or set in stone yet. But it's good to have ideas and options. But we'll see. Because since she's already turning in the other one, I'm not sure if I need to. Although I do like that there would be a reaction as to that might go, make the audience go, I wonder what she's looking at on the next page. And a page turn image, as I like to call them. But we'll see. And that is the page. And then with the rough frames, to see what it looks like more or less closer to a comic page. And now I can readjust and shift things as I still try to figure out what I want, what I don't want. Of course, adjusting the text, which will be key. The text can really affect where you place your characters, where you place your speech bubbles, how big are the speech bubbles, how much text is in each panel. So a lot of things have to be thought about. But that looks pretty good. All right, so now let's recap and bring this on home. So today we did page 1, and it started like this with the rough thumbnail sketch. And then we draw on top of that. And then we drop on top of that some more and add some rough panel framing and some text. And now it looks like we're starting to get somewhere. And that was page 1. So let's go to the calendar. So next week will be week 6, still in April. And we're going to go over more pencils of page 2. And we'll also do a little bit of layout and text in Clip Studio Paint. So thank you for joining me. I have been Trey. You can find my work at treyhodges.com. Power to the creators, and I will see you in week 6. Later.